Hello and welcome to my channel today, Boo Snakes and More. Today we're going to be talking about the 1940s, so please like this video and subscribe to the channel. And for more videos like this, watch my other house channel, A&A Snakes and Stuff, my youngest son's channel, Henny's Toys and Games, or my older son's channel, Little Chris 10. Now let's dive into the video. The 1940s were a legendary decade. They were years consumed by war, and yet bore the hope of new beginnings. The Second World War changed everything. The entire America population united in patriotism, and even Hollywood celebrities and baseball champs enlisted in the army. Habits inadvertently changed. The war was followed by fresh starts and new beginnings in absolutely every walk of life and aspect of society, which paved the way for the fabulous 50s and the age of consumerism. Important historical notes about the 1940s. The 1940s were years marked by war and new beginnings. The first half of the decade was deeply and painfully scarred by the Second World War, which began with the German invasion of Poland in 1939. Years later, on the 6th of June 1944, otherwise known as D-Day, Allied troops landed in Normandy, initiating the decline of the powers of the Axis alliance. This led to the definitive fall of the Nazi fascist totalization regimens and also signaled the beginning of the Cold War. The war years. The first half of the 1940s was deeply marked by the Second World War. The years 1939 to 1945 profoundly impacted the culture and lifestyle in every country involved in the global conflict. The population had to learn to cope with rationing, being able to purchase only what was naturally allotted in order to guarantee all citizens the essential bare minimum for survival. Constraints afflicted every aspect of American daily life. New beginnings as a result of the global conflict. The 1940s were years of war and deprivation, but also of recovery and new beginnings that marked the transition from war to peace. In 1945, the United States commissioned atomic warfare, bombing Hiroshima on the 6th of August and Nagasaki 3 days later on the 9th August 1945. Shortly after, on the 2nd of September 1945, Japan signed its surrender, concluding the Second World War. The following years were rich in creativity and intuitive. There was a huge focus on economic recovery and reclaimed happiness, and new prospects offered by everyday life were reflected in the optimism of society. From fashion to cinema to cars, everything changed in the post-war years. 1940s fashion and style. 1940s fashion represents a perfect mix of comfort and glamour for both men and women, and still remains incredibly relevant today. Men wore suits, with of course ties and hats. Women wore clothes appropriate to the time of day and added style to each moment of the day with matching gloves, colored shoes, and leather bags. The 1940s also saw jeans start to take hold in fashion with a helping hand from future superstars Marlon Brando, James Dean, and Elvis Presley. Women's clothing. 1940s fashion had two distinct phases during and post-war. During the war, even fashion was invertibly affected by national constraints and rationing for the use of fabrics and materials such as wool and nylon, for example. In fact, women's clothing was manufactured using the same materials as those utilized for military repair. Hence, garments became decidedly more functional. Hems were shortened to save on fabric, and clothes were simple and bore very few adornments. Fashion mirrored military styling and utilized versatile and economic, artificial, and semi synthetic fibers such as rayon. It was necessary to be inventive and recycle as much as possible, and knitting became a law mode as women tried to create different items of clothing and accessories for themselves. After the war, women opted for bright and colorful dresses and skirts, and outfits were designed for every part of the day. Suits were very popular, as were dresses, cinched at the waist with small belts, and close-fitting skirts worn with blouses. The 1940s silhouette was characterized by jackets with shoulder pads, cinched waistlines, and pockets, allowing women to carry documents and money on their persons. Women also started to wear trousers more, projecting an image of independence and at the same time elegance. Popular shoes had high wedge heels made from either cork or wood, and gloves were an indispensable fashion accessory that could be worn at any time of day and coordinated to match the rest of the outfit. Fur was very in demand and regarded as a symbol of status. Animal skins and furs were used to decorate luxury dresses, overcoats, and accessories. Leather and crocodile skin handbags were all the rage, as were leather shoes, especially in the patriotic colors red, white, and blue. And you create men's clothing. Men's fashion in the 1940s was also influenced by constraints imposed by the war and the necessity to use poor quality materials. With rationing, men's fashion went from elegant to functional and minimalistic. In the United States and beyond, style was characterized by somber colors and simple lines. Rayon was a popular fabric. Its shiny appearance, reminiscent of silk, added a touch of elegance but at a much lower cost. And the victory suit, a double or single breasted suit, favored functionality and practicality over elegance. They came in dark colors, plain or pinstripe, and often in wool. It was a pretty somber look. Jackets were shorter, trousers were tighter, without creases or edges, and 1940s suits often didn't include waistcoats. They were considered superficial in a time of economic hardship. Ties remained indisposable, however, and came in a variety of bright colors. Braces replaced belts, and informal, comfortable shoes for everyday activities were introduced on the market. The fedora hat was the must-have accessory, made famous by popular films of the day. They were made from soft felt in black, gray, or brown and worn tilted to one side. They were considered perfect for any occasion. Generally, in the 1940s, men wore suits. They were essential to men's fashion, not just the suit, but the whole look, complete with tie and hat. It was a symbol of style and elegance. Hairstyles. Hats were also fundamental to the female wardrobe, as were turbans, which were a useful way of covering up hair that may have been less well groomed than in the past due to the difficult economic situation. Although clothing had become forcefully more eschewed and simplified, hats became an outlet of creative freedom, usually in often recycled materials formed severe lines and imaginative shapes that contrasted with the outfits they were worn with. Hats were a way of adding a touch of class to a look and hopefully hiding less kept hair than in previous years. Turbans covered the whole head, hiding all hair underneath, and were also often made from recycled fabrics. Hair at that time was generally worn long and with a slight wave. Long hair was easier to style into a bun or hairstyles that involved creating volume around the head, like the infamous victory rolls. There was a trend amongst younger women to wear their hair loose and wavy. It became a symbol of fidelity. 1940s makeup. 1940s makeup was as practical as possible and designed especially for working women. Products became multifunctional, such as red lipstick that was used to cover both lips and cheeks. To stand out, eyebrows became arched and thin and slicked down with petroleum jelly. The fashionably thin lips of the 1930s changed radically to a much plumper shape by the application of lip liner outside the natural color. Red lipstick was the lipstick of the decade, matched with the same color nail polish on short half-moon nails. Lipstick had a mantle finish, but shine was added with petroleum jelly. Compact face powder was also introduced for the first time to immense success, and it was generally worn in a lighter shade than one's natural skin tone. Eye makeup mainly consisted of brown and champagne-colored eyeshadows with a touch of eyeliner and mascara. Entertainment in the 1940s. After the Second World War, music, dance, and cinema and sport all became sources of hope. Americans looked to the future with renewed optimism in every aspect of everyday life. Popular music in the 1940s. Popular music in the 1940s defined the swing era. It was the age of Gene Miller, Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole, Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, Doris Day. The list goes on. The radio alternated ballads with frenetic dance numbers, which were hugely popular in this period. And ballrooms reigned supreme as large dance halls played host to big bands in what turned out to be their most significant period in history. Jazz. Thanks to the jam sessions held in two particular clubs in Harlem, jazz developed a new style in around 1945. Bebop was characterized by complex harmonies and very fast tempos. Swing. Swing emerged as the most popular musical style of the decade as big bands toured throughout the country. The 1940s also marked the beginning of the golden age of swing singers. Big band. New economic conditions resulting from the war forced the demise of most of the big band orchestras. Only the major ones, such as Duke Ellington, Count Basie, and Woody Harlem, survived. Country music, also known as country music, country and western, or country western, developed a popular following in the 1940s and became established as an independent musical genre. Popular artists, the 1940s were the decade of the crooner, from Bing Cosby to Frank Sinatra to Perry Cosmo. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra was an American singer, actor, and producer of Italian descent, and arguably the most popular and influential artist of the 20th century, known as The Voice. He was one of the most prolific musical artists of the century. Louis Armstrong, trumpet player, singer, and actor Louis Armstrong was perhaps the most famous jazz musician of the 20th century. His unrivaled popularity helped to promote and spread jazz to a wider audience, increasing its popularity amongst the general public. Bing Cosby, as a multi-talented artist with a long career, Bing Cosby possessed one of the most loved voices of the 20th century, American singer, actor, and comedian. He was one of the first musicians to devote himself to cinema and to immerse into enormous success. His recording of White Christmas is the best-selling single of all time. Nat King Cole, American singer, pianist, and actor Nat King Cole, is recognized by the warm, passive tones of his voice. He was the first African American artist to get his own radio show and was involved in the fight against racial segregation throughout his life. Ella Fitzgerald is considered one of the best and most influential jazz singers in history. A 14 times Grammy winner, she was gifted with a beautiful and powerful voice ranging 3 octaves. She made over 70 records that sold over 40 million copies. Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday is regarded as one of the greatest jazz and blues artists. Her notorious reputation included God Bless the Child, Lover Man, Billie's Blues, and Stormy Weather. She was very influential to the singers of substantial generations. Edith Piaf. European artist Edith Piaf was the most famous chanson singer, nicknamed the Sparrow. Due to her small structure, she achieved world fame for her voice moderation. Glenn Miller. Glenn was one of the foremost jazz musicians and band leaders of the swing era. He was an acclaimed composer and wrote many popular songs, including Moonlight Serenade. He won 3 Grammys, and his arrangements also brought fame to songs by other composers. Benny Goodman, a great musician and clarinet player. Benny Goodman made his mark on the swing era. In the 1930s and 1940s, he was one of America's most respected performers. His continuity involving style tracked the transition from classic jazz to swing to bebop and led the way for many other artists of the time. Popular dances in the 1940s. Social dance played a very important role in society in this period, which saw the creation and evolution of many dance styles, some of which are still going strong today. Lindy Hop, a dance of African American origin, emerging from Harlem in the 1920s, reigned supreme in the 1940s and evolved its style according to the geography of where it was danced. In fact, principal differences in style became so marked as to become identified as East Coast and West Coast, and many other Lindy Hop style variations will remain unnamed until many years later. The jitterbug and the jive were also popular. They are simplified versions of Lindy Hop that didn't have as many steps, making them easier and more accessible to a greater number of people. The jitterbug and jive were danced to rhythm and blues and boogie-woogie beats, as well as swing. Ballroom dances were still going strong, such as the foxtrot, danced in 4/4 time,
can't leave my bed no more, so they keep pissing on my blankets. These cats do.
And the Charleston, another pro of the 1920s, some of whose steps became integrated into the swing dances of the 1940s. Balboa was still immensely popular, and thanks to the close contact between partners and its tight and fast steps was sometimes the only solution on a super crowded dance floor. Or originated in the 1920s, shag was also danced as to fast jazz, swing, and western swing music. Just like Lindy Hop, its style evolved depending on where it was danced. Carolina shag, Corgetta shag, St. Louis shag. Dances of Cuban ancestry were also very fashionable in the 1940s, especially the mambo, which actually originated in the 1940s, and the rumba, which is a much older dance. Cinema and film. The 1940s saw 8 major Hollywood studios flourish and dominate the film market. These included Paramount, Metro, Goldwyn, Meyer, Warner Bros., RKO, and Fox, later becoming 20th Century Fox. Each studio specialized in a peculiar genre and promoted its exclusively connected stars, such as Clark Gable, John Wayne, Gary Cooper, Cary Grant, Ingrid Bridgman, James Stewart, Spencer Tracy, Betty Davis, Joan Crawford, Katharine Hepburn, Humphrey Bogart, and Rita Hayworth. Cinema audiences grew in the war years, and Hollywood emerged from its dark period. During the war, documentaries, combat films, and films made by military cameramen were also made. At the end of the war, film-going audiences grew even more. Sport, American athletes were unbeatable champions in almost all international federations, and before the war, American sport was seen as a complete contest to European sport and to the regimens of totalation and authorization states. Even after the war, American sport continued to be a pure, non-political activity that did not involve the state and continued to be organized by citizens through foundations or colleges in which sporting activity was given great importance. Automobile mania in the 1940s, after the Second World War, cars began to get much bigger and more luxurious, paving the way for the spectacular cars of the 1950s. In the 1940s, cars radically changed in appearance and slowly began to lose their despised connections with the underworld. Iconic motorcycles and cars. Amongst the iconic cars of the 1940s, in addition to the new Jeep, is most certainly the Lincoln Continental, produced by a division of Ford. It remained in production from 1939 to 1948 and is synonymous with luxury. It is a car in which President John Fitzgerald Kennedy was traveling when he was killed in Dallas. The Buick Roadmaster had its moment of glory from 1946 to 1956, and by the end of the 1940s had established itself as an American classic. The Mercury 8 was the first car produced by the Ford division of the same name. First manufactured in 1939, it was a car with intuitive lines and synonymous with design perfectively representing the cars of the 1940s. Also amongst the iconic cars of the period, before the advent of the 1950s car, the Plymouth Deluxe is not to be forgotten. The Cadillac was without a debut, the most iconic vehicle of the period. This car, produced between the 1940s and early 1960s, dazzled more than one generation. It represented the United States during that period, a symbol of quality, class, and luxury. For decades, it has embodied the car per excellence of the U.S., with many technical improvements added throughout the years. Another iconic car was the Chevrolet, another car company that was born in the heart of the state of Michigan. When it comes to motorcycles, we cannot fail to mention Harley Davidson, founded in the early 1900s. Its greatest circulation was in the 1940s, both for the production of military transport for the USA to enter the war, and also for civilian vehicles. Triumph, on the other hand, was a British nationality and manufactured in Coventry, a city that was heavily bombed during the Second World War. Later, it moved to the United States and enjoyed success thanks to the appearance of various models, such as the Trophy, in films in the 1940s and 1950s. The largest American motorcycle manufacturer was, however, Indian models, the Scout, and the Chief embodied a desire for revenge in the reconstruction of America in those years. Falling from grace in the early 1950s, it left the leadership of American motorcycle production to Harley. The birth of the drive-in. Films were very popular built in the 1940s. Cinematic drive-ins spread like wildfire. Legendary open-air cinemas at an affordable cost to everyone, 25 cents for the projection and another 25 cents for the car. It was a hit between 1947 and 1951. Over 4,000 drive-in cinemas were assembled in the States in just a few years. Inventions and card objects of the 1940s. The 1940s saw a huge amount of inventions and interventions in fashion, science, and technology. Bikini. The bikini was invented in the 1940s after the end of the Second World War. In 1943, as part of the rationing program, the United States government declared that swimsuit fabric had to be reduced by 10%. And so in America, that the classic one-piece swimsuit transformed into a two-piece. A few years later, designer Louis Renaud introduced the first navel-bearing swimsuit, cherished the bikini. Jukebox. Jukeboxes spread throughout the states in the 1940s, with wheelchair models taking residence in America's bars and cafeterias. It was the age of 78 RPM records and an irrepressible desire to dance. Polaroid. Polaroid was an instant camera invented in 1947 and for many years remained the only instant camera manufacturer. Electric guitar. In 1941, American guitarist Louis Paul invented one of the most famous electric guitars, the solid body. Shortly, Arthur Gibson put them into production. Frisbee. The name Frisbee actually comes from a cake produced by the factory of the same name. The tray that it came on became the famous flying saucer thanks to the invention of some college students after consuming these cakes. This easily handled flying plastic disc with aerodynamic characteristics was put into mass production. Color TV. The first color television was invented by J. Logie Bird in 1940, and in 1944 he developed the Telecharm television system, which projected color on a fluorescent screen using electron guns. Aerosol. The first aerosol spray can was put on the market on June 15, 1939, after its invention some years earlier by Norwegian chemist Erik Roham, diving breathing apparatus. Dr. Levinson developed the breathing apparatus used for rescuing miners that had inhaled asphyxiating gases to patent a self-contained oxygen breathing apparatus in 1939 that would go on to be used by divers in the U.S. Navy. Jeep. The 1940s were also characterized by a new type of car, the Jeep, intentionally a Spartan military vehicle adapted for rough and difficult routes. To the front, the Jeep transformed first into a vehicle for sporty types, then for adventure lovers, and then became popular for adventures in the city. Atomic bomb found the Manhattan Project, an ammonia enrichment project that consumed in 1939. The first atomic bomb was dropped in New Mexico on January 16th, 1945. Mobile phone. The mobile phone launched properly in the 1970s. However, in 1941, the first mobile telephone in history was invented, allowing remote communication using tones in the local frequency range. Velcro. Velcro was invented by the Swiss engineer Georges de Minsto. It is a highly resistant material and can be fixed and detached by hand. Microwave oven. The invention of the microwave oven dates back to 1947. Condensing energy to cook food quickly. M&Ms. M&Ms were invented by Forrest Mars, inventor of Mars, and Bruce Maney in 1942. Hence the acclaim of Mars and Mary M&Ms. 1940s furniture and decor. 1940s furniture denoted functionality and a renewed search of simplicity, which, after the Second World War, provided every aspect of society. The furniture design began to simplify, becoming more eccentric and functional than beautiful. Furniture was mass manufactured for the first time, meaning that aesthetic period charm was abandoned in favor of comfort and simplicity. Leather or velvet sofas with a rounded, welcoming shape were in vogue at this time, and wood was the principal material used for bookcases, dressers, and practically every other item of furniture. Record players, radios, and porcelain on display were eccentric in all homes of the time. Thank you for watching this video, and peace out to the next one.